Okay, I'm going to make this one quick. I just want to show you a finished project and how I got there. So I have a global studies video that I created recently, and a quick tour of what we see here. In our project window, we have all of our different footage. I have my interviews organized by the trip that the interview subject went on. I have my B-roll, same thing, it's organized by the trip. I have music down here. I have sequences. You've created some of these sequences already, your interview prep and your B-roll prep. My sequence cut 1 is just where my final cut ended up being. I only did one cut, but this is where I put all the footage together. Up here in my source monitor, I have a piece of B-roll. This is a photo from Iceland, and remember, if you go in and if you double click on a piece of footage, it'll bring it up in your source monitor. In my program monitor, we see what's happening in our timeline. So if I skip around here, it's going to show me whatever's happening at that particular moment. So at 40 seconds, this is what we see. So the way that this project is set up, and the way I set up most of my projects, is in my video track 1, V1, I have my interview footage. And in audio track 1, I have my interview audio. And one note about these things, it's really important to keep these pieces of footage attached to each other, the video part and the audio part. So right now I have linked selection highlighted in blue. And that means if I click on this interview here, this piece of an interview, and if I move it, it's going to move both the audio and the video at the same rate. If I don't have this selected and I move my video track, then it's going to separate it from the audio. And this will tell you how much you've separated it by. And in this case, it's 1 minute, 57 seconds, and 17 frames. So I'm going to press Control-Z to undo. You could also go to Edit Undo. And you can, by the way, you can go back multiple steps, so you can hit Control-Z a few times in a row and it will undo each step. So that can be really useful. So where you could really run into trouble if your clips get out of sync is if you drag this, say, like 8 frames backward. Then all of a sudden when we play through this, it's going to look really uncanny because your audio and your video are no longer in sync.
How other people live.
So you want to make sure that that doesn't happen. If it does, just if it says -8, that means you need to move it forward 8 frames, which can be hard to do. Let's see if we can get it. That's 7 frames, 6 frames. Might have to zoom in further here. And now we're back in sync. If it says +8, that means you need to move it backward 8 frames to get it back in sync. For the most part, it's a good idea to just keep this selected. So again, in video track 1, I have my interview video footage. Audio track 1, I have my audio from the interview. And then in video track 2, I have my B-roll footage. So this is just illustrating what my interview subjects are talking about. If I zoom out here, you can see I have some stuff in video track 3 as well. And this is just, if I toggle that on and off, you can see I'm just giving credit to the photographers here. So I have any text from my project is in video track 3. In audio track 2, I have my music. And one nice little thing that you can do is if you want to, you already have music in there, but you want to watch your video without the music.
I'd always seen the toothbrush drives.
Hit S for solo to make it so that you only hear the audio track that is soloed, or you could mute your music track here by hitting M.
That they do every year.
For video, whatever is in the highest track is what you're going to see on screen. So if I drag something into the track above this, into track 3, you're going to see that. If I drag something into track 4, it's going to hide what's in track 3 and track 2 and track 1, and you're just going to see what's in track 4. So each channel just builds on top of the other channels. So let's look a little bit at how I prepped this project. Let's go into my interview prep, and you can see that I have color-coded my clips. I opted to organize this by the country or the trip that each person went on rather than just by the interview subject. So I think I have 2 Bulgaria interviews, and I made them both mango is the color here, and I have a couple of Iceland interviews, and same thing, I organized those together. And remember to set a color for your clip. You can right click on it and go to label and choose a label there. My B-roll prep is the same. So for my Bulgaria footage, I've made it this orange color again. Iceland, it's cerulean. So this just helps me stay organized. When I start to bring in clips from my interviews into my main, my first cut here, then I can see that, okay, if I want to illustrate something that's happening in this orange clip, I can just go find some B-roll in the orange section. It makes it a little bit easier to navigate through all of this B-roll that you have. Notice here that I have 6 minutes of interview footage that I might use. This is all useful stuff, good answers that I got from each of my interview subjects, but my final project is only 2 minutes and 10 seconds long. You're going to end up leaving behind a lot of really good footage, either because it's repetitive or it doesn't actually push the story forward, or whatever reason. But you're always going to end up having more interview footage that stays out of your project. Same thing with B-roll. This project, I had way less B-roll than I usually have. I only have 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Usually for a project that ends up being about 2 minutes long, I would have about 10 minutes of usable B-roll, but I was relying on the footage that I got from the people who went on the trips, and they didn't know going into their trips that I was going to be making a video. So what came out of those trips was a little bit limited in terms of visuals. Now, when I started to organize my project, I had a rough outline of what I wanted it to look like. I had this first section where you see the interview subjects against a backdrop that says something about the trip they were on, and they just introduce which trip they went on. After that, I wanted to address why they wanted to go on the trip in the first place. So all of these answers address that question. And I only ended up using, I think, 4 different people to address that question. They all had 4 different answers for why they wanted to go. And then the other interview subjects said something that was somewhat repetitive, so I left it out. After that, this middle section here is kind of about service trips in general, because the Bulgaria trip and the Cambodia trip were service oriented, so I wanted to have those interview subjects talk about that a little bit. After that, it was takeaways from the trip. And then finally, I asked if you were to, if somebody was to ask you if they should go on a trip, what would you tell them? And so that's what this last section is all about. So having a rough plan for that, for what your outline of your project is going to be, makes it way easier to edit. So if in this first part I want to look at why people went on these trips in the first place, then I go over to my interview prep and I find clips that address that, and then I just say, you know, I click on it, Control C to copy it, and then I copy it over to my my sequence, my first cut here, and then I find another one that addresses that question, but it's a little bit different and it's something I want to add to the project. Same thing, I just copy it over here. And so that's just a way to, you know, make sure that you're utilizing your best footage, but also not being overwhelmed by, you know, trying to sequence all of this, like this massive amount of footage here. So after I finish sequencing my interviews to create a narrative, what I would do is go in and add some music. So I added this piece of music here. And then I started to add B-roll to my A-roll just by, again, going over here and Control C to copy, and then copying it into my sequence at the end of the sequence, and then dragging it in to where it needs to be in video track 2. If you don't want to paste it at the end and then drag it into video track 2, what you could also do is uncheck this video track 1. This is really important. If you uncheck this, then when you Control V to paste, it'll paste that footage into track 2 because it's the only one highlighted. Same thing if you pasted it into track 3, if you had track 3 highlighted. If you don't do that, if you have track 1 highlighted and you paste it in, it's just going to cover up, it's going to erase whatever was previously in track 1. So you want to make sure not to do that. I think the easiest thing to do is just to paste it at the end of your project and then drag it to where it needs to go. So I got all my B-roll footage in there, and then I added my titles, and that was it. One other really useful tool I just want to mention is this track select forward tool. If you hit A on your keyboard, it'll bring it up. You'll get these 2 little arrows. I'm going to zoom in here so we can see a little bit better. So if I click on this clip, it will select this clip and every clip after that. So let me zoom out to show you. All of these clips are now selected. So I can either then go back to V for my selection tool, and then all of these are highlighted, so if I drag these to the right, it's going to move all of those clips to the right. I could have also just stayed with my A tool and dragged like that, and it'll drag them over. And the reason this is useful is because then I can fit another clip into this gap here. I've created a gap for it. So I can click on this clip from my sequence monitor, drag it down into my timeline, and now it fits perfectly. I can delete this, this gap here by using my selection tool, clicking on the gap, pressing delete or backspace, and then that way we haven't covered up any of our footage. If we tried to put this clip in without moving over all the other footage, again, it's just going to erase whatever was previously in its spot. So we don't want to do that. A, move this forward, drag this in, delete the gap. So that's all I have for you today. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.